Welcome to the Wolverine Confidential Podcast, brought to you by Corewell Health. I am Andrew Kahn.
I'm Ryan Zook.
And I'm Aaron McMahon.
Michigan learned its bowl matchup this weekend. What should fans expect in the game against Texas? And will it change how we feel about the season? We grade the 2025 Michigan football team coming up on Wolverine Confidential. All right, guys, good to be with you too here Monday morning, December 8th, day after the Michigan football team learned its bowl draw, which, preceded the playoff matchups being announced. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about Michigan football's season and whether the bowl game can change how we feel about it, and really getting our thoughts down on how we feel about this 9-3 season so far. But I just want to start with basketball because it just happened. Both the men and women played their Big Ten openers this weekend. And the men won 101-60 against Rutgers, which was just 1 point different from the previous game against Gonzaga. Their fourth straight win by at least 30 points. They've hit 100 in three straight for the first time since 1989. And yeah, this was the Big Ten opener, supposed to be, all right, the big bad Big Ten, and yet Michigan steamrolls their opponent. And then the next day, the women say, anything you could do, I could do better, and beat Purdue 104-56. I will say this. I don't think I sent you guys the video. I did share it with some other friends. After the Michigan men's game on Saturday, we have our presser. Then I go back to my seat inside the Chrysler Bowl to write. And at that point, the Purdue women are coming on for their shoot-around at Chrysler. And my gosh, I watched some of it and said, Michigan is going to win this game by about 50 points. And that's exactly what they did. It was, some broken jump shots on that team. But yeah, it's Michigan men 8-0, or is it 9-0, 8-0? Who could keep track? They're undefeated. They're 8-0. They're going to try to climb in the rankings today, maybe up to number 1. We'll see. My guess is 2 behind Arizona, but we'll find out. The women 8-1. Outside of that 3-point loss to number 1 UConn, Michigan has won by an average of 95-50. So yeah, good starts for the Michigan basketball teams. And Zook, since we talked about it on the last pod, let's kind of put a bow on this. You said the hockey team was going to play a weekend series against number 1 Michigan State. Or Michigan's number 1 and Michigan State was 3. What was the rankings there, and how did it go?
Yeah, 3. Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, it's when is expected. It was a battle both nights, a lot tighter checking games than I expected, just because, I mean, there's so much talent on both teams, 28 total NHL draft picks, a lot of offensive skill, and really both games were extremely tight checking. Friday was probably the best I've watched Michigan play defensively, and I mean, maybe in the Brandon Naurato era. Michigan State entered averaging almost 40 shots per game. Michigan held them to 23, really limited any second chance opportunities. Freshman goalie Jack Ivankovic was sensational. 23 saves for his third shutout of the year. First time Michigan has shut out Michigan State in East Lansing since 2000. A huge 3-0 win on Friday night. And you kind of knew the Spartans would come back on Saturday with looking to earn a series split at Yost. And that's eventually what they did, winning 3-1. But, I mean, it was a nail-biter throughout. Michigan scored early. Michigan State put up like 17 shots in the first period. They did everything but score. But I thought in the second period, Michigan actually played, kind of found their footing a little bit and played better, and actually tilted the ice in their favor for most of the period. But Michigan State scored late to tie it. And of course, the goal that snaps the scoring drought was like a little rebound from behind the goal line, and the guy banks it off of Ivankovic and in. And then he scores in the first 2 minutes. Same guy scores in the first 2 minutes of the third period for a 2-1 lead. State scores an empty netter. But overall, a really an enjoyable top 3 series between both teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if they both stay at 1 and 3 in the rankings this week too. I mean, they're going to be problems to deal with all year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're both making noise in the NCAA tournament this year.
Thank you, Ryan. By the way, I was at Pinball Pete's in downtown Ann Arbor with my kids this on Friday. It's about to close, and they're moving locations, but they'll be closed for a few months. Anyway, we played the the dome hockey game. Maybe need to save it for another podcast because this could be a long discussion about the difficulty of actually scoring a goal in that game. It's very fun, but almost impossible. Even with no goalie, you just can't do it.
All strategy.
All right, let's talk Michigan football. Again, learned their bowl draw yesterday. They're 9-3 going into this game, and I think we may have given listeners the wrong impression, or I'll let you guys kind of clarify your stance. We had a post on MLive.com/Wolverines after a recent podcast that kind of said the 9-3 season looked better in context, given all the young players and stuff like that. I got an email saying that we were delusional in our thinking, that they only beat two decent teams all year. This person said those teams were Washington and Maryland. Nearly lost to two horrible teams in Purdue and Northwestern. Didn't see much progression from Bryce Underwood as the year went on. So I guess, what do you guys think of the season? Was this a success? It's interesting. They had the shot for marquee wins. They didn't get them, but it wasn't their fault. The rest of the Big Ten kind of stunk. We can get into Bryce Underwood too, but kind of generally, 9-3, like thumbs up, thumbs down. Where do you stand? Aaron, we'll start with you.
How much time we got? Because this can be an all-day conversation. It depends on like your view of what a success is, right? Like coming into the year, the coaches and the players deemed a successful year their goals, right? They state their goals every year. It's to beat the two rivals, Michigan State and Ohio State, and play for championships. To beat Michigan State, they couldn't beat Ohio State, and they weren't in the Big Ten title race, and they didn't get into the playoffs. So by those measures there, yes, this technically was a disappointing, you could say maybe even a failure of a year. But again, when you zoom out and look at what transpired this year and who played and everything else, you've got to take that into context. They had a true freshman at quarterback. They had a true freshman emerge at receiver. Now you can make the case, well, maybe Michigan should have more experienced, better receivers to so that didn't have to happen. They had a young offensive line and a defense who I did think fall under expectation. So when you take everything in a vacuum, there's good, there's bad. I think the coaching got in the way at times. You can make a case there wasn't the development there for Bryce Underwood maybe you would have hoped. There's just a lot there, and I think when you consider all those factors, look, they improved by 2 games over last year, which in the regular season, which is a good thing. They have an opportunity to win a 10th game here in the bowl. You could certainly make the case the season schedule was a lot easier than last year. So that certainly is in there. I don't know. I didn't expect the world of Bryce Underwood. I remember we did the preseason predictions and we all like guessed on where we thought Bryce Underwood would fall in the stats. I believe I said middle of the Big Ten in passing yards and et cetera, et cetera. And that's about where he was. Maybe closer to the bottom half, but he was near the middle. You just couldn't expect the world of the freshman quarterback, especially with young, inexperienced pieces around him. So, and you also got to take into effect the injuries, especially at running back. Like if Justice Haynes had played the entire year, where would Michigan be right now? They probably would have been in that USC game. They probably would have won that Northwestern and Purdue game a little bit more easier. Maybe they've been more competitive against Ohio State. I don't know. And then again, Jordan Marshall didn't play the final 2 games either. So there's just a lot going on here. A lot of factors you have to consider. Do the coaches play a role in this? Yes. I don't think they've been anything great. You could certainly make the case Bryce Underwood didn't develop like you would have hoped. But I don't know. I'm not the sky is falling guy here in this situation.
Oh, well, a lot to digest there, but no, I mean, I definitely see our listeners. He has some validity to his comments too, like 9-3. But I think fans would have been expecting to be more competitive in the games that they lost. And I mean, during Michigan's title are like years where they were winning 3 big championships against poor teams. They were absolutely dominating them. They were able to get backups in the game pretty early. That really never happened until the Maryland game this year. And as far as Bryce Underwood, I was in the same camp as Aaron is thinking. Yeah, I mean, it's very rare for a freshman to step on campus at quarterback and light it up, no matter how highly ranked he is, and especially without a bunch of pass catching options around him. I knew Colson Loveland's loss would probably be felt more than most people realize. I didn't think the tight ends, at least catching the ball, had a very good year. Drops were an issue for most of the season, which definitely didn't help. And I thought, yeah, we probably could have seen more development and growth from him as a passer. I mean, we talked about early on, like, oh, does he throw the ball too hard? Does he need more arc? And it sounded like that it's still the same issues that were carrying over late in the season. And then the interceptions happened late in the year. He was actually doing a really good job of protecting the football earlier in the season, and then those issues kind of creeped up late in the season. I guess not exactly what you would hope from. I still think he has a high ceiling, and it's, yeah, like Aaron, I don't think the sky's falling at all. But the way the season transpired, I think people were maybe expecting more dominant in wins over teams that clearly weren't as talented as Michigan, and in those toss-ups be a little bit more competitive. But I definitely don't think Maryland was the second best win.
Yeah.
If there's two wins I was looking at, it's probably Nebraska
Yep.
and
Washington.
Washington win is the most impressive.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'll go Bryce, and then I'll zoom out. I said he'd finish 6th in the Big Ten in passing yards. Zook said 7th, and yeah, Aaron said middle of the pack. We'll call that 9th. He ended up 11th. 185 yards per game. He was behind another true freshman, Maryland's quarterback, and a redshirt freshman, Minnesota's. Touchdowns, he had just 9. Tied him for 15th. Michigan State had 2 quarterbacks who threw more touchdown passes than Bryce Underwood did. Completion percentage, not good either. 61%, 14th in the Big Ten. Brought some running to the equation. Only 3 Big Ten quarterbacks ran for more yards per game. 5 had more touchdowns. So like in general, stats were not there. Maybe the eye test showed you a little more, but sometimes I just wonder if the fact that he's a 5-star, he's number 1 overall recruit, getting paid all that money, and looks the part just with his size, his stature, that we're kind of overrating him. Again, if his name wasn't Bryce Underwood, if he didn't have the winged helmet on, would we be, as optimistic about his future?
I mean, that goes back to the case that, like, he's a true freshman. In most years, in previous college football iterations, like, he probably wouldn't have played this year. So the fact that he's kind of learning on the job, it was a learning year for him, and I think a good chunk of the offense, and I think that's why you saw some of those struggles. Yeah, the turnovers were a concern late. You wonder if that played with his mental psyche. We saw him play a relatively clean game for a good chunk of the first half of the year. So it's clear that the fundamentals are there, the talent is there, and now they need to put pieces around him to make it work. They need more receivers. The offensive line needs to grow. The running game was fine until the injuries fell off, and you can't predict that type of stuff. And not only was it just one, it was both backs. So that's hard to predict, and it effectively made them one-dimensional, which again, in turn, it helps opposing defenses. So that in turn goes against your stats and production and everything else there too. So I'm bullish on the offense. I think they're a year or 2 away from being very good. Now they need some more pieces, and we've talked about this. They need another receiver, maybe 2. I don't know what's going to happen at running back, whether Justice Haynes comes back or not, but they're going to need a reliable second option, whether that's Sabian Hyder or someone else from the portal. But I think the offensive line could be very good in a year or 2. They got some pieces, fundamental pieces there. They've got the depth if guys can stay healthy. The options are there. Now they have to put it together. So that's year 2 and we'll get in the offseason, but next year will be fascinating. Defensively, I have more question marks. They're going to lose a lot of guys on that side of the ball. Like, I don't think the defense was anything to write home about. And that was the case. Like last year, they were good down the stretch, and they were able to beat Ohio State and beat Alabama because of the defense. And you just didn't get those dominating performances this year that maybe some of us were expecting. So while they were deep this year defensively, it was clear the talent wasn't there from a week-to-week basis, and it hurt them, specifically in like USC game, Ohio State game. Like, so I don't know. It was all around effort. I probably slightly below expectations, but look, they were 9-3. It's year 2 of the Sharon Moore era, and we said this in the early in the year. They were figuring themselves out as the season went on, and maybe they didn't figure themselves out by the end of the year. I don't know. You could point to the offense and say, did they have an identity? Like, were they really good at anything? The running game was solid when they were healthy, but other than that, like, it was obviously it was a work in progress.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the talent on this team. Correct me if I'm wrong, but these all Big Ten awards, kind of speak to where Michigan was. Who did they have? That was a first team guy. I think Derek Moore, maybe. You had the coaches and the media had different ballots. He was first team for one of those things. Was he the only guy who was on a first team either side of the ball?
Correct. Yeah, Michigan no first teamers on offense, and they had one second teamer in Jordan Marshall.
Yeah,
But
one.
again,
Yeah,
as if the season would have played out again, and Justice Haynes and Marshall were healthy, and Haynes probably could have been running back of the year. But again, you can't predict the injuries and all that.
and it's chicken or the egg with those awards sometimes, whether the team success then helps individual guys get stuff versus the other way around. But yeah, they just didn't have the guys. Again, not many second team or third teamers either on either side of the ball. Here's the thing: this schedule this year, it's set up for three shots at marquee wins, right? At Oklahoma, at USC, and then Ohio State at home. And they lost them all. They weren't like particularly competitive in any of them, but they won the rest of them. But like again, what were the best wins? Ryan talked about it's probably Washington finished 8-4, at Nebraska finished 7-5. Heck, New Mexico went 9-3. But every team else, it's like Northwestern 6-6, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Maryland, each 4-8. Purdue 2-10. So like that's your, and I apologies to Central Michigan. I don't know what they finished, but
Above
like these
500, above 500. Yeah.
Bowl
There you
eligible in one game out of the MAC championship game.
all right, there you go. So I mean, the fact that we're discussing them is like maybe better than some of these Big Ten wins kind of shows, that it wasn't there for them. But again, you don't really have control over your Big Ten schedule. It's not their fault. Wisconsin, Michigan State, Nebraska and Washington, even like not great years. So they didn't take advantage of the big moments they had. But I'm not willing to penalize them necessarily just because the schedule wasn't so good. We knew this going in. It's a reason why we all picked 9-3.
Yeah, look, they beat up, or they didn't beat up, but they beat the bottom half of the Big Ten and some of the middle of the pack teams. They were like, if you look at the standings, they're basically the top of the middle of the pack of the conference, and that's kind of where most of us had them coming into the year. Maybe not in this capacity. Maybe you didn't predict that some of these finishes, these close games against Purdue and Northwestern, but they still got the win, and it still counts for something. So I don't know. I keep going back to this, and I mean it. Like, this was a young team still trying to work themselves out, figure themselves. There's a lot of young pieces here. They made mistakes. They screwed up. They almost cost themselves some games, yet they still were able to find a way to win. The challenge now is building on that and not playing some of these close games, beating up on your better opponents and winning comfortably. Ryan, you went back to that. You mentioned the run at the Big Ten championships a few years ago and how they were beating up on some of those bad Big Ten teams. Well, Michigan was one of the most experienced teams in the country those years. They had veteran players. You had guys who've been around a long time. And knew how to play. That wasn't really the case this year with Michigan, especially offensively. So I think we'll learn a lot next year from all facets of the offense. There's a lot of growth will need to be made, but I think Michigan's got a good foundation, as I said last week.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the next year's schedule and stuff. It's too early to probably talk about that, but I'm curious now if we're going to be talking about next year, if Michigan wishes it could have flipped its 2026 schedule and 2025 schedule, because next year it looks like it could be pretty tough. It's almost like, all right, this year you maybe take your licks and have another tough season, and then next year, like, the schedule's all right, yeah, like, we're going to have a better team, a more experienced team, and we can kind of take care of business next year. But it'll be interesting to see how much growth this team can take, and also how it fares against a schedule that includes like an Indiana, Oregon, Penn State next year too, along with like the Ohio State and Iowa, and then again, Oklahoma at home. So it'll be a fascinating schedule next year too.
Life is beautiful and fragile. We fall. We get tired. And sometimes we get sick. But with Corewell Health, we are also strong. We fight disease. We battle cancer. We come together. We come back. We push forward. When the body breaks, we break through. Corewell Health. We can.
Some people say the bowl game, the non-playoff bowl games, are the first game of the next season, and that will be the Citrus Bowl, the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, against Texas on New Year's Eve at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. Let's not. We're not going to spend too much time on this game because we will preview it, in future podcast episodes. But let's just talk about Texas a little bit. They're 9-3. Started the year preseason number 1. Immediately lost at Ohio State in an ugly game. But then only 2 losses the rest of the way. At Florida, at Georgia. And then some impressive wins. You beat Texas A&M team in your most recent game. That had not lost all season. A couple other top 10 wins against Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. So yeah, a lot of talent on this team. It kind of reminds me of last year where they're facing a team that had very high preseason expectations, didn't get into the playoff. The difference is Texas kind of knew they weren't getting in at this point, as opposed to the team they played last year in the bowl, Alabama, which, maybe felt that they were snubbed as the last team out. So yeah, I guess just early impressions of this matchup with Texas.
It's going to be a challenge. I think this Texas team is better than maybe some people perceive them. I think a lot of people watched that first game against Ohio State and thought, well, this team isn't that good. Arch Manning isn't that good. Well, if you go back and look at the stats and look at Texas' resume, it was a playoff caliber resume. I mean, they beat, as you said, they beat 2 top 10 teams, 2 teams that are in the, 2 teams that are in the playoff, 3 top 10 wins. Yes, they lost to Georgia by 25 points, but they lost to Florida by 8. And then again, at week 1, they lost to Ohio State by a touchdown. So, and Arch Manning ended up throwing for almost 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So he ended up having a pretty good year. It wasn't up to expectations, and we keep throwing that word around today. As you said, Texas was the preseason number 1. They didn't end that way. They ended, I think, 13th in the college football playoff rankings. They were the third team out of the field. So they're right there. They had a good resume. I think if they had beat Florida, and finished 10-2, they probably would have gotten in. So it's a good team. It just to come down to how motivated they're going to be, right? In this day and age of bowls and playoff talk, when teams don't get into the playoff, you wonder about their psyche and whether they're going to take the game seriously. So, and hearing from Steve Sarkisian, the Texas coach, Sunday, it sounded like they're prepared and they're going to be motivated and want to play. We'll see when it comes to opt-outs and who plays and everything else. As we saw last year, Alabama had pretty much a full roster. Michigan did not, and Michigan still won the game. So, that's not necessarily a predictor either. But, we'll get a better, I think, feel for it as the month goes on here.
Yeah, I mean, these types of bowl games now with that non-playoff games, it's really tough to gauge with opt-outs and with motivational levels because, I mean, you got some schools, a lot of schools actually declining bowl invites now. It just shows the nature of college football now. But I mean, overall, though, as far as the matchup interest level, it's a marquee matchup between 2 blue bloods, which, yeah, I mean, if you're going to have this type of bowl game, might as well have it against a Texas. I thought Vanderbilt would have been an interesting matchup too. But yeah, no, I mean, for a meaningless game, it's an interesting matchup for sure.
Aaron, you'll be headed to Orlando to cover that game near the end of the month. Do you like Cheez-Its?
On occasion, I'm not a regular Cheez-It connoisseur. I will say they came out with some white cheddar ones recently. They're pretty good. I've tried those.
Recently, dude, those have been out forever, man. Oh my god.
Oh, have they? Oh, I didn't know. I just saw them recently and tried them recently, so they're good. But I don't eat them regularly. No.
I'm a goldfish guy myself. Zook, you like them? You want them to bring you back some or what?
Yeah, I mean, I like the flavored ones. Like there's pepper jack, white cheddar. There's some hot and spicy ones.
Gosh.
Tabasco flavor ones. Yeah, the plain ones, no, like they do nothing for me. There's no flavor to them. But if you add get some of the flavor ones, yeah, then count me in.
All right, fair enough. We'll get Sharon Moore. He already talked about this game a little bit yesterday on a Zoom call that Aaron mentioned that Sarkisian was on as well. But we'll get him today to talk a little more about this game and the recruiting class he signed last week. But another football note, Michigan has a new special teams coach. Aaron, Ryan, tell me about him.
It was a bit of a surprise. I know we knew that Sharon and Michigan were looking for a new special teams coordinator after they dismissed J.B. Brown last week. It's Kerry Coombs. And for those who have followed college football for a while, they probably know the name. Former Ohio State assistant coach. He was in the NFL for a little bit. But yeah, he's most known for his time at Ohio State. He was an excellent quarterbacks coach, very good recruiter in the Detroit area. He was a defensive coordinator for a year, about a season and 3 games, alongside Greg Madison, former Michigan assistant. So he's an Ohio guy, born and raised in Ohio, played at the University of Dayton, coached in the high school ranks in the state of Ohio, coached at Cincinnati, Ohio State, went back to Cincinnati. Now he's at Michigan. Quite the move here. I was a bit surprised, just given the connections and everything else. So I haven't gotten clarity on the connection here, how this happened. But yeah, interesting move. He will be the special teams coordinator. Haven't got the contract details yet. I'm curious to see what those look like. Because there's another motive here too that I was thinking about, right? Like there's a unknown with Wink Martindale, whether he's going to be back next year or not. He is under contract for another year, but as we saw last year, he tested the NFL waters. I expect him to do it again this year. If he does move on or find a job elsewhere, Michigan's gonna have a decision to make a coordinator. Now, I don't think they go to Coombs. I think he's 64 years old. I don't know if he wants to be a coordinator again. Um, but there are other options on the staff to potentially take the job, like a Lamar Morgan, like a defensive line coach Lou Esposito. So if one of those guys slide in, especially Lamar Morgan, you have Coombs that could potentially coach a secondary and be a cornerbacks coach. So I'm wondering if there's ulterior motive here, to get him on the staff. But as I said, he's a good recruiter. He's well known for his time recruiting the state of Michigan and the city of Detroit. Coached a lot of high-level cornerbacks during his college career. I think Michigan in the press release had 7 first-round picks in the NFL draft during his tenure. So he's a decorated assistant coach at the college level. Brings experience. He is a little older, but I do think it's a net positive here in regard to the special teams job.
Definitely did not envision having 2 former Buckeye coaches on the staff at the same time, but it does add a little extra interesting element there. And yeah, like Aaron said, I wouldn't be surprised if by the time the season starts, his role is more expanded than just special teams coordinator. That's what surprised me the most. Oh, they're bringing in this the veteran of his caliber as special teams coordinator. I get Michigan needs a lot of work in that area, but just seems like a lower level position than expected. And yeah, there is always the unknowns of more coaching changes. Sherrod Moore did say on a conference call yesterday that he doesn't anticipate any more changes. But again, as we know, I mean, Sherrod isn't always upfront and truthful about those types of things, and again, some of that's out of his control too, with assistants potentially leaving. But yeah, just the thought of Coombs and Wade Martindale on the same staff is interesting too. A couple 60-plus-year-olds shooting it up. I don't know if Coombs is a golfer, but that would be them two on a golf course together would be pretty interesting.
All right, so that kind of covers the Michigan football news that I wanted to hit on in this episode. But listen, we talk a lot of college football. We've been talking about the non-playoff bowl games. I want to get your guys' quick thoughts on kind of what happened with the playoff matchups and the Big Ten championship. If you guys want to talk about that, with Indiana beating Ohio State. Like, here's the thing. The big story, of course, is Notre Dame not getting in, Miami and Alabama getting in. Notre Dame athletic director telling ESPN that any rankings ahead of the final ones are, quote, farce and total waste of time. No kidding, buddy. We've been saying this on the Wolverine Confidential podcast for years. The TV show is the problem. ESPN paid a lot of money for the CFP. They want a weekly TV show as sort of a bonus. I get that. Plus the powers that be in college football probably fine with more people talking about the sport on a weekly basis. But it sets up something like what just happened, right? I mean, we're a team that is 8 spots ahead of another. In this case, Notre Dame over Miami wins, 4 straight blowouts, and yet somehow falls behind that team. I think if you just told people, hey, we put a 10-2 team over another 10-2 team that it beat earlier in the season, do you think there would be this kind of outrage? I don't.
You nailed it, and that was what I was just about to say, right? Like if this would have just happened like this week, and we hadn't gotten rankings before and seen the move, that I don't think anyone would have blinked an eye. But as you pointed out, like it's been a climb for Miami the last couple of weeks, when, as you said, Notre Dame hasn't really done anything to drop. So that's the problem with the week to week poll, right? Like you see how their line of thinking is one week, and it somehow changes a couple of weeks later based on what happened elsewhere in the college football world. So I have no issue, on face value, right? Miami getting in over Notre Dame because you said they have the head-to-head win, identical records, similar mutual common opponents. Makes sense, but as you said, like just a few weeks ago, Miami was further down than Notre Dame, yet somehow they're able to jump them in a couple of weeks, and after a weekend where neither team played.
Yeah, and I get the head-to-head too, but, like, that was so long ago, and I feel like you have to take into account recent, games as well, and, I mean, even just as far as Alabama, like, they were kinda limping into the down the stretch too, and they aren't affected at all by the conference championship game, but BYU was, so it's just it's a flawed system, and it's just I find it hilarious because, I mean, I was never a huge fan of expansion 2, and if you just kept it at 4 teams this year, it wouldn't be that hard of a field to project and make, or even at 8 teams. And no, well, you have to have 12. And sure enough, then that's the level of the cutoff of where it gets interesting. And the ACC deserves some blame too for their tiebreaker scenarios too. Like, I mean, come on, a 7-5 Duke team somehow making it to the conference championship. Like, it's there a lot of fault can be placed at a lot of different places, but yeah, it's in the end it was going to be a tough decision. You weren't going to, if Miami got left out, they were going to be upset too because the head to head. So it's just there was no good way to come down to 12 teams with the format the way it was.
And they didn't have to do it this way. They chose, they had Miami steadily climbing, but they still had that BYU buffer. But then BYU loses its conference championship game and drops exactly one spot to allow Miami to be then one spot behind Notre Dame and initially, and then the head-to-head comparison vaults them above. But look what they did with Alabama and Georgia. Georgia destroys Alabama in the SEC championship game. What happens to those two teams? Nothing. Georgia doesn't move at all. Alabama doesn't move at all. So, like, you had precedent there to do nothing. And I think people would have been okay with it. So it's interesting that Notre Dame is now taking its football and going home and will not be participating in it in any bowl game. But yeah, how about this Big Ten team? Big Ten gets 3 teams in, including the top 2 seeds in this whole thing, with Indiana and Ohio State switching spots after the Hoosiers knock them off in the Big Ten championship game. Why can't they go win a national championship?
Right. They look like the best team in the country. I'd say I was surprised, but I wasn't. Like, Indiana has been very good now for 2 years. Ohio State hadn't really played a close game for most of the year. Yes, they had that 7-point win over Texas week 1, but like they hadn't been like in the fight in late in games very often. So you wondered how they were going to respond to an Indiana team that's very good defensively, and everyone wants to talk about Fernando Mendoza and the receivers. Indiana's offense is very good. That defense is kind of flying under the radar. They're very good too, and you saw what they could do against Ohio State Saturday. They did a very good job of limiting them on the ground, made enough plays through the air, and held them to a bunch of field goal attempts. So it was an impressive performance. I got to think at this point, just from a move to the bracket here, like Indiana's number 1 seed, they're probably going to play Oklahoma or Alabama. Then they're probably going to have Texas Tech in the semis. I'm curious to see how that goes. But other than that, I mean, Indiana's pathway, I think they're a real national title contender.
The only bad thing about that game was that it really didn't mean anything because both teams were getting a bye. Like, I mean, I guess, yeah, for Indiana, it was cool to see them win a actual Big Ten title for the first time in forever. So like that, like 1960 something and the 1940s for the first outright. So like it was good overall, like just good feel good story for them. But like in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really affect each team's pathway to a national title, which is ultimately the major goal. But still an interesting game, and yeah, it's two national title contenders for sure.
Yeah, it should be fun to watch. We'll have we'll be talking more about that and plenty of Michigan sports on future episodes of the Wolverine Confidential podcast. You can read all our work at MLive.com/Wolverines. Thanks for listening.